We've heard stories of the Hat Man, but who or what is he? Now, this is a story that might finally solve the mystery. It dates back to 1881. This took place outside of Akron, Ohio. There was this young man named Charles. Charles said that when he was a young boy growing up on the farm with his father, he remembers there was this story. And everybody in town always talked about a man named John Sullivan. It said that John Sullivan was this inventor, and not much was known about him. He never came out of his home except for at night, and when he did, he would wear this black hat, a cloak, and cover his face. Now, it's believed he covered his face because early on in life he had sustained very severe burns, and so he would hide his face, and this is why he didn't come out during the day. Well, come to find out, several people in the town of Akron began missing, and they suspected it had something to do with John Sullivan. When they went to his house, they were in disbelief because they had found several of these bodies that had gone missing. Well, it was said that John claimed he was working for the devil and he was claiming souls. Shortly after this, he was tried, he was hung, and he was buried in an unmarked grave. But that did not stop John, because it said he still returned and people went missing. Well, he said he remembered this story, but he thought it was just sort of a legend to kind of scare the young children in town. But he said this one particular day he was working outside, feeding the pigs. When he looked over into the pasture where the cows were, he sees this man. And he said the man's face was completely black and covered. He was wearing this big black hat and a cloak, and he had bright red eyes. So he turned away from him, and when he looked back, this man had now moved to the other side of the pasture. So he hurried up and ran inside and told his father and said, Father, like there's this strange man outside, and he described him. He said after that, his father said, no more chores for the day. You're staying inside. Come inside. And he made him go into the house. Well, he said that night he went to bed, and at that time he didn't really think about much what had happened earlier. Well, as he is sleeping, he awakes in the middle of the night, and he said he had this feeling of static electricity running through his body. And he just couldn't figure out like what was going on, because he just felt really bothered by something. And he said all of a sudden he turned, and standing next to his bed was that man he had seen out in the field with the hat and the cloak and the red eyes. And he said he just stood there next to his bed. And he said out of this man appeared three other black shadow-looking people who started to walk around his bed. He said this man then proceeded to take his hand, which was, just this dark shadowy figure, and move it towards his head. Well, right at that moment, he said his father comes in the room. Now this man is gone. The other three shadow people that were with him are gone. And he said, I just had this bad feeling that I should come in here. Is everything all right? Charles started crying, and he told his father what had happened. And he said after that, his father every night would come and check on him continuously. So, was that the origin story of the Hat Man? Now, I do believe that spirits try and reach out to us in the afterlife, especially spirits of people that have passed that we know. Now, my grandmother told me this story. She was a very spiritual person, and very close with her brother. And so when her brother got sick, she would call him every day. And she was pretty distraught because she lived 1,200 miles away and couldn't be with him all the time. But she said one day she was at her house and she's vacuuming. And all of a sudden, the lights in the room started pulsing. And she said the lights started to get brighter and brighter. So she was thinking maybe it was the vacuum that was causing this. So she unplugs the vacuum, and still the lights are pulsing. And then it just got brighter and brighter to the point where she almost could not see anything in the room because the lights were so bright. And then she says she hears this heavenly music start playing. And she said she knew at that moment that her brother had passed away. And sure enough, 10 minutes later, her phone rings to tell her that her brother had passed away. My second story is from my uncle. He passed away very suddenly. And one of my aunts, who he happened to be close with, she would talk to him on the phone all the time. And so after my uncle had passed, it'd been 3 or 4 months, her phone starts ringing. And she looks at her phone and is like, man, how is that possible? And she picks it up and is like, hello? And it just, just sort of a raspy kind of whisper, but she can't make out anything that it's saying. And this keeps going on for like several weeks. She was getting all these phone calls from my uncle's phone. So she calls up his wife and is like, hey, I keep getting phone calls from Pat. Like, are you guys calling me? And his wife's like, that's impossible because his phone has been turned off, for months. And I actually have his phone here in the drawer, and there's no way anybody could be calling you. And so the last phone call she received, there was a voicemail. And when she listened to the voicemail, it was playing this song. And I can't remember exactly the name of the song, but it was my uncle who had passed away. That was his favorite song. And then after that, she didn't receive any more phone calls. But what's kind of creepy is that shortly after this had all happened, my aunt passed away. And I often wondered if maybe my uncle was trying to reach out and tell her that, that was going to happen. But I don't really know. So yes, I do believe that spirits can reach out to you and do reach out to you from after death.